Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. We are live this morning on Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. If you are joining us live, I hope you'll participate by adding any comments or questions in the comment section so that our guest, Katherine Lewis, can um, address them live on air. If you are watching a replay, thank you for doing that. Katherine will not be available to address your questions live if you're watching a replay, but you can dialogue with others. We see a lot of that happening increasingly more and more. And you're saying, who is this Katherine you're talking about? Well, Katherine Lewis is a journalist, parent educator, and author. She wrote the book, The Good News About Bad Behavior, and she's here to tell us about that. The blurb that I see everywhere about her book says, the current model of parent discipline is outdated as a rotary phone. We need a path to making everyone in our homes more capable, kinder, and happier. So she's going to tell us about that, why she came to that determination. I know she's done extensive research before she wrote the book. But first, I want to say thank you for being with us, Katherine. Good morning.
Good morning, Kamira. It's great to be here.
Great. We are very happy to have you here today. Why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about your book and your work?
Sure. So I'm really excited to be here as a parent of teens myself. I am a fan and customer of your teen media and grateful to talk to you. So my book, The Good News About Bad Behavior, I wrote because when I had kids, I sort of knew that there was this terrible two-stage. And then I had heard even that there's this three-nager stage that they get a little sassy and it's almost like a preview of their personality in adolescence. But by 4 and 5, I was thinking, when did they just start doing what you say? Because mine were not. and I was volunteering in school and in all, a Girl Scout leader, an Odyssey of the Mind coach. And in all these settings, I saw kids who were just more out of control than I remembered from my own childhood. And I dug into the research. I'm a journalist, so I always look for answers from information. And one study in particular that really struck me from the National Institutes of Health, looking at a group of over 10,000 children and young adults across the US, they found 1 in 2 will have a mood or behavioral disorder by age 18. And that just struck me because it made me realize that if you're dealing with your child who's anxious and maybe your neighbor's dealing with a kid who has ADHD or someone down the street is managing depression, a lot of us have kids who are dealing with big emotions, unruly thoughts, impulsive behavior, the kinds of things that maybe when I was growing up were more rare. And I did find a couple other studies that were really powerful, that the level of dysregulation has grown dramatically in just the last 10, 20, 30 years. And so that inspired me to try to tell the stories of how parents, educators, psychologists were working with kids to help them learn to manage their behavior, thoughts, and emotions. Because the model I grew up with was the carrot and the stick, right? Either you do something because you're worried your parents are going to punish you or because you want some reward. And that just doesn't work with kids today because they just don't have the skills to manage their behavior. It's not that they don't want to do what they're supposed to. It's that they really haven't practiced it enough, or they don't yet have those skills. So our focus as parents needs to be supporting their mental and behavioral health and working with them to find the strategies and tools that will help them to succeed. And that's really the message of my book. I spent 5 years, shadowing psychologists and going into research labs. My kids say I stalked families because I would just sort of hang around and wait till something interesting happened. And that's really the conclusion that came out of my research. And the book came out in 2018 and in paperback in 2019. And then just spending a couple of years traveling around the country, talking to large groups of parents, I've come to realize how much this resonates with people. And, if you're dealing with a behavior you really don't understand or seems out of proportion, you're not the only one. And over the course of reporting the book, I also got involved in the broader parenting journalism community. And I wanted to mention we're having a conference this Friday. And it's really aimed at writers, journalists, content creators. But if you are a parent who's always wanted to write an essay about what's going on, we hope you'll join us at the Parenting Journalists Conference on Friday. You can find more information about it at parentingjournalist.com. But really, for me, the more information there is out there about how we can support and work with our kids, the more we normalize managing different challenges, the stronger we'll all be as families and as communities.
Thank you. And I want to repeat that. It's the Parenting Journalist Conference, and the URL is parentingjournalist.com.
Exactly, yes.
And it's happening this week, Thursday and Friday?
On Friday, May 20th.
On Friday.
Yes.
May 20th, Friday, May 20th. Okay. The title of your book, The Good News About Bad Behavior. What is the good news? We'd like to know.
Yes. So the good news is that when kids show their behavior that's out of proportion with the situation, it's a signal to you that something's needed. And we often talk in the parent education, psychology, therapy field about externalizing and internalizing behavior. So some kids externalize, they show you what's going on, and then you can address it. Other kids who internalize, right, they may have stomach aches or they just withdraw. You don't always know as a parent that they need help. So the good news is that it's a sign, right? It's a red flag. Hey, parents, caregivers, wake up. Either this child doesn't have a skill that they need, or there's something going on, right? There's something in the environment. There's something they're struggling with. And if we get curious and start to really investigate, what might help, that's the path to the solution. And I think often when there's bad behavior, right, parents worry. We worry about our kids, right? Parents and caregivers want the best for our kids. And we start catastrophizing, like, right, if this is going on in 6th grade, what's going to happen in high school? And oh my gosh, in 10 years, they'll be living in a van down by the river, right? And that fear and panic just makes things worse. So if instead we can say, oh my gosh, how great. I see there's a challenge. Let's work on it together. That confidence, the non-reactive presence, as my friend Ned Johnson and Bill Stixford say, that is what helps our kids the most. If we can stay grounded, confident, supportive, not freaking out, right? That is so important for our kids' regulation. And a lot of the research in my book found we co-regulate with our children, especially when they're little, but even into adolescence. Any human being, when we're together, our bodies start to synchronize, right? Our heart rates tend to synchronize, our breathing, so if we can stay calm, regulated, under control, we're going to help our kids get there as well.
Okay. So the good news is that a bad behavior is a signal, kind of like a fever. The good news about a fever is the body is working and it's telling you something's wrong.
I love that analogy. Yes.
Parents relate to the fever one. In your book, you say there is a rise of misbehaving children. Is there really a rise, or have children changed, or have we just changed our expectations of them?
That's such a good question. And I'm going to say both, because it is such an interplay of the environment with genetics, with the way our society is right now. So there's a documented rise in mood and behavioral disorders. So that is ADHD, anxiety, depression, suicidality, self-harm, substance addiction. And we're getting better at diagnosing it, right? So things that maybe 20 years ago wouldn't have had a label, now they have a label, and labels can be good because it helps us get help. And in addition, right, our kids there's 3 factors in the book that I identified as contributing in addition to this rise in dysregulation. One is the lack of unstructured downtime, playtime. Even our teenagers need play. They need to just chill and explore, interact with each other. The social world is the play of teenagers. And so often our kids are scheduled, right, from the moment they wake up to the moment they fall asleep. Number 2 is the onslaught of social media and just just media in general, right? There's always something to watch or listen to or stream or engage with. So our kids are often turning to the outside to look for what makes them happy, right? Do I want to be like this TikToker, or do I want to look like this person on Instagram, instead of looking inside themselves for that intrinsic motivation and drive? And intrinsic motivation is strongly correlated with mental health. So that's the second factor. And the third factor is our kids are unemployed. So previous generations, children would have been working an after-school job, watching younger kids after school, helping around the house, right? Helping grandma. And now our kids' job is to achieve. And when you get an A on one test, there's always another test, right? If you're the star on the soccer field, there's always another game. So that is a job that is never done, and it's not contributing to the well-being of the family or the community. And that's what all humans need, is to feel that we have a sense of purpose, that we are making the world around us better. And the more we can bring back that contribution, that sense of capability for our children, again, the better their mental health will be. They'll have a sense that they belong, which is the deepest human need, to belong in a community, in a family, to know that you matter, right?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned social media, and you talk about technology in the book, especially social media. And it's been a few years since you wrote the book. So since your original research for the book, have things changed with technology and social media? And if so, how?
So things have changed a little, but I think even more than the number of platforms available, the knowledge that we have as the general public about what's behind the algorithms is really powerful, because we've learned with Instagram and TikTok and Facebook that they are really addictive, right? And they are programmed to really drive our pleasure centers of our brains, that we want more and more little hits. So I think that's helpful information for us to regulate our own media and social media use, and to help our kids regulate their use. That said, social media is, as I said before, the job of teens is to figure out their social world. They're very peer oriented. So they need some of it. And the research, I think, is really interesting. You may know Jean Twenge's research. She's also cited in my book about the correlation between the number of hours on social media and depression, anxiety, and narcissism. And as teenagers spend more time on social media, their levels of mental illness go up. However, the kids who have zero time are also really struggling. So there's a sweet spot, right? The kids who are completely checked out, who don't have those social media connections, generally that's a sign, right, that they don't have peer connections that are helpful for them. So we as guardians, caregivers, and parents need to help our kids find that feedback loop where you're getting enough connection to know what your friends are doing, to feel plugged in, but not so much that you feel depressed or inferior, or that you're starting to doubt yourself, because that is really the feedback loop on Instagram, right? Is you're scrolling through photos and suddenly you think, why not I have that thin, or why don't I have that fabulous vacation, or why don't I have that boyfriend, girlfriend, partner? And so that's a conversation with our teens about how they feel, so they can start to self-regulate. And I do recommend hard limits, a couple hard limits: no phones in the bedroom overnight. And I know that's hard for a lot of people, especially if kids are already doing it, but you can always say, I heard this brilliant author, Katherine Reynolds Lewis, on a fabulous interview with Kamira on your teen media, and I realize we've messed up. So we're going to dial back, and at night, the phone will be charged in my bathroom, in the hallway, somewhere that you know your kid is away from that stimulus, because nothing good happens on Instagram after 11 p.m. Right? Yeah. It's just going to rev them up, get them upset. Potentially they could have negative comments coming from other people. So middle of the night, no phone. And number two, I do, especially with their younger adolescents, if it's possible, keep screen use in public spaces in the home, so that if they're tempted in sort of sexting or engaging in risky behaviors with people they know or don't know, they might know that a parent or guardian could walk by, or a sibling might walk by. They'll be less likely to take those kinds of risks or make those kind of unsafe choices.
Okay. I want to remind people that if you have a question for Katherine, go ahead and put it in the comment section and we'll address it live on the air. Let's switch tacks a little bit. In my intro, I said the current model of parental discipline is outdated, is as outdated as a rotary phone. And some people may not even know what that is anymore. What's wrong with the old ways of parenting?
Yeah, so the problem is that 20, 30 years ago, kids grew up in a different environment. So they were playing independently in backyards and neighborhoods, riding their bikes, dealing with friends from a very young age. So they learned how to manage their impulses, how to be safe, how to deal with anxiety or big emotions. They learned if I fall out of a tree and scrape my knee, my friends are going to help me. I'll deal with it myself, right? They learned a lot more skills in the process of growing up. And most of our teens have not had those experiences of just unstructured peer play where they develop some of that self-regulation ability. So telling them, try harder, just focus, deal with it, get over it, right? Those kinds of comments are not going to give them the skills that they want. And the model I grew up with, which I mentioned before, is sort of the reward and punishment. And that rests on the assumption that if our kids were just more motivated, they would be able to remember their homework assignment or clean up their plates after their snack, or all the things that we want them to do. It's not an issue of motivation. It's an issue of skill, structure, routine. And so that's where we as parents need to focus, is helping team with them on challenges. And problems fall into three categories: the kid's problem, shared problem, our problem. So the bowl left out on the couch after a snack, that may be the parent's problem. So because they might not care about that. So we need to invite them into problem solving and ask for their help to solve that problem, and the more that we can work with our kids, give them ownership, have them be part of the solution, the more that they're likely to cooperate. So the only other thing I will say is that I think a lot of us get this message that teenagers don't want to be around their parents. They don't care what we think. They certainly give us that message often enough, but they do, right? Kids, even adults, right, love and care about their parents' opinion and their caregivers' opinions. So we need to keep being in there, in the mix, inviting them to be with us, engaging in their, interests. We're going to get rejected a lot more in adolescence than when they were 5, 6, 8, right? When you would say, do you want to play you go fish, and they'd say yes, we might need to ask 10 times, but at the 10th time they'll say yes. So we need to keep inviting them into our world and asking to be let into their world, because that connection is a really important piece of helping them to develop good habits and also just sound mental health.
Thank you. So the connection, keeping that connection strong that's our responsibility. We have a question for Sabina, and it's in two parts. I'm going to put up the first part, then the second. The first part says, can you tell me more about dissociation in teens? And the second part says, how you can handle it, as this is a huge problem with teens. I see teens having panic attacks or having some kind of anxiety, and it is affecting them in school.
Yes. So anxiety is the number one biggest challenge for our teens today. In the study I mentioned before, about 30% of kids will have an anxiety disorder. So, and there's amazing tools for anxiety. The dissociation is definitely concerning to me. I would hope that that child has a therapeutic relationship and is working, because often that's a sign of some kind of past trauma, and you want a traumatologist to address. I'm not a physician, but this is my understanding as a certified parent educator, that you really want to be working with someone who is skilled in trauma, who can help understand why the present reality is so upsetting or disturbing for that child that they dissociate. In terms of panic attacks, again, anxiety is something that can really be well addressed by so many different tools. I love the work of Katie Hurley. She has a couple of great workbooks for kids. Also, Janine Halloran has a wonderful workbook. And I have these just lying around my house so that if my kid's having an issue or they're starting to panic, I'll just open the book and say, hey, do you want to try one of these strategies? And I like to think of them in 4 different categories of coping skills. One can be so processing. So when you think about mindfulness, meditation, journaling, all of those, talking with a friend, talking with a therapist, those are all processing coping skills. And often that's the only one people hear about, but there's a ton more. So there's also going to be physicality, dealing with your physicality, whether that's going for a run, taking a hot shower, putting cold washcloth on your forehead. And then there's going to be distraction. And so that can be okay. Like, we don't want to numb out on Netflix forever, but a little bit of distraction, if you're really overwhelmed, can be super helpful. And that could be, again, like a pet, a friend, a good book, music, dancing. And then the 4th category, I'm on the spot now, I'm going to look it up, but so processing, physicality, I'll look it up and let you know, but there's just such a wealth of information. And if your child is in therapy, you also should be learning, right? Because we as parents have so many opportunities to help reinforce what's happening in therapy. And the therapist may be with that child 1 or 2 hours a week. We're with them all the time. So if we see our kids struggling, we can be the one to say, hey, what kinds of strategies might work right now? Is it, grounding yourself in reality and using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where you name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can see, 1 thing that you can sense. Those kinds of exercises don't take a lot of time. And if your child has them at the ready, then in that panic attack moment, and they've practiced them, right? In that panic attack moment, they can pull out one of those tools from their toolbox. And that's one of the bottom lines of my book and all of the wonderful books out there about parenting kids right now, is that we all need many, many more tools and strategies than we had in previous years, or previous generations, just because of all the challenges that our kids face. So I hope that's helpful. And especially at school, if your child is worried about a panic attack at school, previewing it and talking through, so what would you do? Like, who's the one safe person in the building you can go to? What are 5 things that you might do if you're worried about a panic attack? That helps them to feel that they have something they can do in that moment. And a lot of parenting just comes down to that, right? Previewing, anticipating, planning with your child, and then they go have an experience. Maybe it didn't go the way you thought. And then you process, you review, you help them debrief, you start planning again for the next time. What would you do differently? So again, the panic attack is not a problem, right? That's something that a lot of people are experiencing now. The key is to find what are the solutions that are going to work for your child.
Okay. Speaking of tools, tell us about the apprenticeship model.
Yes. So the apprenticeship model is my attempt to name something that is an alternative to that old reward punishment model. And in every model of teaching kids to self-regulate that I looked at in my book, and there were 4 primary models, 2 in schools and 2 in homes, they all shared these 3 elements. Number 1, a primary focus on connection with you, the caregiver or adult. Number 2, communication about the behavior or challenge in a way that builds the kids' self-regulation, their ability to manage their thoughts, behavior, and emotions. So that's communication that is focused on self-regulation, not on blaming, shaming, punishment, bribing, all the kinds of old modeled communications that we had. And then number 3 is capability building. So really seeing our kids as a work in progress on their way to being functional adults, which we know happens around 25, 26 when their prefrontal cortex is fully developed, right? We shouldn't expect them to have a fully developed executive function until then, but they're a work in progress, they're building skills, and that really is our job as parents, is to team with them to build the skills and to find the tools and strategies that they need.
Thank you. We have a follow-up from Sabina, so I want to put that up so you can see that. She says, thank you so much. We are looking into therapy. We tried grounding techniques and everything you've mentioned. Sometimes she said, she being her daughter, that the phone is a good distraction. Is it okay to use the phone as well, or should we steer her away from screen time?
That's a great question. And I would say I think it's fine to try it and then really ask her to be honest. Like, is it really helping? You know, and Jet, often I suggest using a timer. So like, okay, so your phone's going to be a distraction. How long do you think you'll need? And set like a 10-minute, 15-minute timer, because that's when at some point it tips over from just being like a distraction into then being numbing, right? Where you're numbing out, you're not dealing with the issue. So, and I just looked up the 4 categories. So we have processing, physicality, relaxation, and distraction. So processing is really thinking through like your journaling, you're trying to spot your thinking errors, and whereas relaxation is more like the breathing exercises, gratitude practice, grounding practice. Processing is more really intensely thinking about getting the feelings and thoughts out.
Okay, great. We are at the end of our time together, but I want to ask you my one wrap up question, and that is, if we can only do one thing or remember one thing from this conversation, what should that be?
There's so many things. I think it's really this, that, our kids' challenges are not a problem. It's just the way they're wired. Each of us has a mix of brain chemistry that is unique. We have strengths and challenge areas. And the key is not to see anyone as broken or flawed, but just needing the tools and strategies that fit them. And that if we team with our kids to find those tools and strategies and really try to be their partner, that they're going to find their way, and we'll help them with it.
Okay. And for those who may have logged on a little late into the discussion, can you show us your book again and tell us about the conference?
Sure. So the book is The Good News About Bad Behavior: Why Kids Are Less Disciplined Than Ever and What to Do About It. And I'm also co-founder of the Parenting Journalist Society, for anyone who's interested in writing or creating content around parenting or writing essays. We're having a conference on Friday. You can find out more at parentingjournalist.com. And I hope to see you there. And thanks so much for having me, Kamira.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, everybody out there in laptop land who's watching us. And I hope that you will return tomorrow, when on Wednesdays we have Coffee with Jen and Sharon, and they talk all things parenting, especially parenting teens. It's a lot of fun. So join us again on 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. Until then, we'll see you later.